What's going on, family? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Crossroads presented by the Puerto Rican podcast La Mogolla. You can follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Instagram as well. If you have any issues pronouncing La Mogolla, or if you don't know how to spell it, it is on the bottom of the screen. You can visit us and watch the Spanish episodes that we release on a weekly basis as well. Okay. And today I'm going to be covering my experience with the autonomous indigenous nation of the Guna people. Okay, these folks live in Panama, where I was for my honeymoon. I did visit Costa Rica and Panama, and my wife was interested in visiting the San Blas Islands. Okay, these islands are located in the Caribbean Sea off the eastern coastline of Panama. Okay, there are 370 plus islands, and 365 of these are managed by the Guna people. Okay. I understand that they inhabit over 60 of these. And to this day, the San Blas Islands are now called Guna Yala, which is a camarca or a province of these indigenous peoples. Okay, so there are three main camarcas in Panama for these folks. One of them is Guna Yala, the one we visited. The other one is Guna de Waragandi. And the third is Guna de Madugandi. Okay, so I am going to add these words on the screen. So if you're interested in investigating or researching them, you can. Really interesting story. I did not know who they were. I knew that there was an autonomous indigenous nation that lived in the islands, but I didn't know their history. I am a historian, so obviously I did take notes. I did some research afterwards, and I was just mind-boggled with what I experienced. And it took us 3 hours to get to a port, right, to be able to catch a boat and visit these islands. We were staying in Panama City, and the port is called Carti, and it's 3 hours away, right, towards the east of Panama City. So I do have some pictures and videos I want to share. Some of them I took myself during the honeymoon. Others I found online. But I also wanted to offer a background of who the Guna people are. Okay, so when it comes to Guna, or the etymology of the word, Guna means land of Guna or Guna mountain. The Guna is also a language. Okay, it's not only a people, it's also a language. And it comes from the Shipshan languages. Okay, this is a family of languages from indigenous folks of South America, specifically the northern side of it, right? Known today as Colombia. And in the early 1500s, the Crown of Castile had sent different explorers, right, to conquer the area. And the ones that spearheaded the colonization there were Alonso de Ojeda and Vasco Núñez de Balboa. Okay, these folks forced the Guna people to move up north. And unfortunately, even after Panama became an independent country, separating itself from La Gran Colombia in 1903, they had to fight against the Panamanian government for their sovereignty and independence. Okay, in 1925, they did have a revolution where they ended up moving into these islands. Okay, these are folks that lived in the mountains, and now they're forced to live on islands. Okay, and amazing story. Is really deep, is really long history, and I was just mind blown. That's why I'm doing this episode. Okay, so for starters, I wanted to share the Guna Yala map. Okay, it is located on the eastern coastline of the island, and on the east side, you see Panama City. And then all the way to the west, you see Carti, which is the port we had to arrive to catch our boats. Okay, it was a 3-hour ride through the mountains. We were so high up that we could actually reach the clouds. It was amazing. And on the right side of this map, you see their flag. I do not know what the colors mean. It is 2 arms crossed with a bow and arrow and 8 black stars. Okay, the colors have changed throughout the years, I've read. Meaning different things. So I do not know what the current colors mean. Before Guna Yala, this area was called San Blas. But since the Guna people control that area officially, now it's called Guna Yala. Okay, so this is the flag I mentioned. It's pretty beautiful, right? You can see how they are warrior-like when need be. Okay, and they also have an extra official flag, which was mind-boggling to me. I first saw it on the dashboard on the SUV I was in on my way to Carti, and it actually has a swastika in the middle. The first thing I noticed was that the swastika symbol was counterclockwise. And if you look deep into the history of the symbol, it means a lot of things for different peoples and different countries and nations, right? You can find it in Kemet or ancient Kemet, known as Egypt today. You could also find it in India and a lot of Hindu traditions. You can find it in the Middle East as well, in Iran. Okay, and when the swastika is clockwise, it can mean, or it could symbolize the sun, or it could symbolize success, and other things as well. It's depending on where you go and who you talk to. Now, when the symbol is counterclockwise, it symbolizes night and karma. Okay, so this is where these indigenous folks are going with this. And the interesting thing about this is that they added this symbol on their flag in 1925. This is way before Nazi Germany was ever founded. Okay, so really interesting stuff. I was not expecting to see a flag with this symbol, but I stayed quiet. I did not ask. I didn't act offended because I was not. I knew that it had to mean something else. And I stumbled upon, what it meant when I arrived to their port. Here's a photo of the mountains where we were at. You can see the clouds, how close they were. Here's a video of their port in Carti. Okay, so this is the Caribbean Sea. I was really confused when I arrived because I thought it was a lake, because once you're driving for 3 hours, in the mountains, you don't expect to reach the Caribbean Sea, right? Especially coming from Panama City, where you can see the shore as well. It's mind-boggling. I thought it was a lake at first. I didn't put two together. I did nap too, so I was kind of groggy. But when I got there, I asked, is this a lake? And they're like, no, this is the Caribbean Sea. And I'm like, man, this is really confusing because we were in the mountains for 3 hours, going up and down, right? So you don't expect to reach the Caribbean Sea after that. Here I'm showing a video of our boat ride towards our first island. I do forget the name. I know that there's 1,000 inhabitants in it. It's the biggest island in Guna Yala. They have their own schools. They have, their own Congress hall, different homes and businesses as well. Okay, so their businesses are mainly based out of fishing, agriculture in the mainland, and tourism, right? So they're not fully a sovereign nation, right? They're not fully a sovereign state. They have their own, laws and customs and, and way of living, but they're not fully independent. They do use the U.S. currency due to Panama using it. So obviously they depend on tourism. Unfortunately, due to the rising sea levels, they have to use corals to expand the islands, right? And they're facing a lot of issues, especially not being originally from these islands, right? These islands are really small. Some of them you can walk around them in like 10 minutes. Okay, so they're facing these issues currently. Talking about how revolutionary they are, here's a mural, right? A painting of both of their flags. In 2025, they will be celebrating 100 years of their revolution. Okay, but on the left side of this picture, you see a Guna man stepping on the Panamanian flag. Okay, so it's really bold. Some people see it as disrespect, but if you know their history, you would understand on why they have this type of attitude. Okay, and on the right side, you see a lot of Guna warriors, right, in the waters. And on the horizon, you see a U.S. Navy ship. Okay, they informed me that the U.S. Offered the Guna people weapons so they could fight against the Panamanian government, during that revolution. Obviously, during this time, the U.S. as an empire is looking to expand. Okay, it's growing. It's not the most powerful nation in the world yet, but it is looking towards, the Caribbean and expanding. It was already in Puerto Rico. It had control over a lot of areas in the Caribbean. It already invaded Dominican Republic and Haiti a couple times. So it's really interesting how divide and conquer is always constant, right? When an empire is involved in other countries. So basically, the U.S. was weaponizing the Gunas to fight against the Panamanian government. And we all know, right, the history behind Panama and the U.S. and how they've controlled the Panama Canal for a long time. They do not currently, but it's a long history, right? Really complex, really complicated. So Yeah, these people are really bold. They mean what they show. Okay. And in this case, they don't want to be a part of Panama per se. Here you see a mural of three revolutionaries. I did not take this picture. This picture I found online. This is when they were celebrating 90 years of revolution. And the revolution was called the Dule. Okay. Here I took a picture of a typical house in Guna Yala. Okay. Made out of palm trees and bamboo, and these are traditional homes, right? Their Congress Hall is actually made out of this as well. But here I took another photo of another home that's more Western-like, right? When you go to the Caribbean, you see a lot of houses built with zinc ceilings, and it's just a contrast of their former traditions or their traditions, right, with Western influence. Okay, this is a school that they have in that island that we went to. There's a couple hundred students here, and really interesting how different they are from their older generations, right? I noticed how this is a matriarchal society, and the older females are really adamant in not speaking Spanish, for example. They do understand it, they do speak it, but I was told that they understand like half of what you're saying. Okay, they still speak Guna, and the younger folks are letting the Guna language go. The social media influence has molded, right, the newer generation into a different direction. So here's a picture of their Congress Hall. They do have a representative in the Panamanian Congress where they obviously fight for these people's interests. And this is where they meet. This is where other representatives from the Panamanian government come to meet with these folks as well, with their leaders. And this is where they have their meetings. We also went to a different island where it was just for tourists. Nobody lives there. It's only managed, right, by the Guna people. They do have restaurants. And this island was so small, you can walk around it like in 10 minutes. Okay, and these canoes that you see here are still used. The older generation still rows these canoes from island to island. They tend to criticize the younger generation in using motors on their boats, right? So there you see the contrast, right? The difference between the older generation and the new generation. I do understand people that want to use motors because it is a 20-minute, ride from one island to the next, especially from the port. So I can't imagine rowing myself to point A to point B. It's amazing how these people still, travel this way. And this was our boat that we used to reach all these islands. And this is us leaving that island. And the water's clear, really transparent, beautiful white sand. They have their own restaurants there. The fish is great. Like I mentioned earlier, their economy depends on fishing a lot. And their patacones or fried plantains are really good. We call them tostones in Puerto Rico, but they're called patacones in Costa Rica and Panama. This is me wandering around and seeing the whole island. And here are some molas, okay? These are the cloths. These are sewed by their women, and they are symbols, right, of their nature, of their customs, or their values. I bought my own, and my wife bought another. This is a common woman, right, in the Guna community, okay? And like I said, they're really, their conviction is so strong in keeping the traditions alive that they dress traditionally. They speak traditionally. They manage businesses as well. The majority of the businesses that I saw in these islands were managed by women, okay? So they also celebrate different ceremonies for girls where they first experience their menstrual cycle. They go through this ceremony, celebrating their womanhood, and they do not celebrate this for males, right? Males, or the version of manhood, is not celebrated. It's not that they're hated or anything like that, but the society's focused on that female energy, which I found really interesting. Okay, and behind her you see molas. This is my mola. The reason why I bought this is because there's 4 birds on the mola that I bought, and the 2 birds on top are looking backwards, and that reminded me of the Sankofa bird that we find in Western African traditions. It resonates with me when it comes to history in a lot of ways. So, and the next one I'm about to show you is my wife's, right? And it's actually like 6 feet long. Okay, this is just like half of it. So I had a beautiful experience there. I really respect their conviction and how they want to maintain their customs and how long they have been fighting for their independence, right? I do not consider the Guna people a sovereign state because they do depend, on the US currency because Panama depends on it, right? And it's a domino effect. Okay. And unfortunately, they have to continue expanding their islands, right, with corals and rocks because of the rising sea levels. And it's estimated that they would have to move back to the mainland. I'm pretty sure they will move back to their other provinces that they have. And there's things, there's pros and cons. The pros is how beautiful it is to see a people defending their customs, right, and their traditions. But at the same time, they lack healthcare, and the older generation still believes in the traditional ways of healing, with the waters and the shamans and whatnot and readings. Before we caught our boat to go to the first island, we saw a girl. She was probably 4 or 5 years old, that had breathing issues, and she had a tank, and they had to take her to a main hospital in Colon, I believe. It was the closest place they could actually take her to. So that was a few hours, right, of driving. So let's say you have an asthma attack, or if you have a stroke, or if you're suffering from any type of illness or condition, it's going to be really tough for you to heal or to reach a doctor, right? They do have a clinic near the port, but it's not good enough to treat all the illnesses that may exist. So that's something that they should be working on. And I heard they're going to be working on building a hospital nearby, but in the end of the day, it's something that they're lacking. Now, when it comes to the economy, they do depend on tourism, but in the end of the day, it's really hard to manage the waste that tourists generate, right? A lot of these people travel to Guna Yala looking for economic opportunities, right? Some people want to invest in different businesses and whatnot, and the Guna people are not having it, right? They do not want anyone managing their finances or their economy other than themselves. So not even Panamanian people can go down there and do whatever they want, right? There's rules that you have to follow. If not, there's going to be some heads chopped off, right? And I respect that. I do estimate them moving back no more than 10 or 15 years from now, to mainland Panama, and unite with their other provinces or camarcas, right? Due to the rising sea levels. It's something that they fully understand. They did suffer a tsunami a few decades ago, and it devastated a lot of these islands. And it's already estimated that they would have to move and that they would lose their language as well, right? Due to TikTok and social media and the TV and stuff like that, right? It goes against their traditions. And in my opinion, it was visible. It was visible when you see an older woman in her traditional clothing and you see a younger girl next to her, or a boy. You see how they dress more Western like, right? So that's really interesting. It's something that colonization creeps in, even if it's forced or not, right? If you have a colonized nation nearby, their influence on you is going to be strong, especially when you're outnumbered. I respect their courage a lot, but everything is bound to change, right? So let's see how it goes. I wish them nothing but the best. I highly encourage anyone that travels to Panama to visit them as well. Okay, so this is what I have for you today. And remember to follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Instagram as well. Okay, stay easy. And thank you for tuning in.